Hey everyone, David C. Andersen here coming at you from the woods behind the Knife Center. Because today we're pitting two budget bushcraft knives against each other. It's the Morakniv Garberg versus the Condor Terrasaur. Let's do this. So the Morakniv Garberg was released a couple of years ago, and it's the full tang Mora knife that people have been asking for a long time. We've got a sturdy blade with an overmolded handle and a protruding pommel. It's definitely a solid tool, but there's actually a new competitor running around in the woods these days. And that knife is the Condor Terrasaur, which is adapted from a custom design by Joe Flowers. And these days, in the Condor version, it follows very closely the same formula as the Garberg. We're out here today to compare these two knives feature by feature to see how they stack up to each other, and to see which one is worth your money. Because even though Moras always have been a great deal, the new Garberg started about 90 bucks right now in 2019, which is a little bit higher than some people may have expected from a Mora. Meanwhile, the Condor comes in a bit over $40. So we're gonna find out which one's best. So since these are a couple of bushcraft knives, we're gonna keep our tests today to sort of some bushcraft tasks. But before we head down the hill to find some wood that we're gonna use for some tent stakes, I wanna talk about the sheaths real quick. So the Condor comes with a very Mora-like hard plastic sheath. It is ambidextrous. The knife will go in either direction and has good retention. You know, it's not gonna fall out very easily on you. You've got a nice thumb pad there that you can use to push out. And if you wanna orient that on the other side, this belt loop actually does slide off and you can spin it around so you have that for you no matter which side you're using it on. We've also got a couple of drain holes right at the bottom to help moisture run out. And all in all, it's a very solid and economical package and very easy to carry too. This is a fairly lightweight knife. The Mora actually comes with a couple of different sheath options, and today, the one we have out here right now is the premium leather sheath option. It's a black leather affair with a snap flap on the front that keeps it completely, not so much completely exposed, but it keeps the tang of the knife and the hilt of the knife covered up very nicely. Still very easy to carry knife. It is a little bit heavier than the Condor, however, so if ultralight is your thing, if weight is a concern, then you're probably gonna wanna go with the Condor. As I said, there are a couple of sheath options for the Mora, and if you're not a fan of that leather, they actually do have a hard plastic option as well, called their multi-mount sheath, that has a lot of great options for attaching that sheath to all of your different gear. So we've got some sapling right here that we're gonna take down to see how these knives perform on green wood. Now, both of these knives do have a scandi grind, as you can probably tell, which is, you can kind of think of it like a double-planed chisel. These are great for working all types of wood. Basically, the ground portion of the knife comes straight down to the point at the edge. There's no secondary bevel on this Condor. The reason I mentioned the Condor specifically is because the Mora actually does have a hint of a secondary bevel right at the edge, something that's common to a lot of Moras actually. Fortunately, that's going to sharpen out pretty easily, so that's not a big concern in the long run, but we'll see how it fares right now on some wood. So in order to cut down a tree with your knife, as opposed to some kind of chopper, you want to bend it over, and you're actually going to do a rocking motion with the blade. This is because you're not actually chopping it, you're actually going to be pressing through the wood while it's under tension. That's giving me a little bit of trouble here, but you do want to come in at kind of a 45-degree angle to the grain so that it's going to pop that loose as you go. Let me go ahead and bend it the other way. Just goes to show you that it doesn't always work quite like they show it in the textbooks. So now I'm going to switch over to the Condor and see if it behaves similarly on this branch right next to it. So this particular sapling was pretty gnarly actually, and both knives performed pretty much the same. They did the job with just a little bit of fuss, not too bad in the grand scheme of things. So now we're gonna take one of these back up to our block up there, and we're actually gonna break this down into smaller pieces and use this to make some tent stakes. So the next thing we're gonna do is use a piece of wood to baton our knives across the grain on this branch to get the pieces that we want to use. Now, when it's done safely, this can be a great way to get more utility out of your small blade, but you gotta have materials that can stand up to that sort of abuse. Now the Condor, while most of their blades are made using 1075 carbon steel, the Terrasaur actually uses 1095 carbon steel. It's not quite as tough actually as 1075, but you're gonna get plenty of edge retention, and it still ought to be plenty tough enough to do this sort of job. We've got about 1/8 of an inch thickness. I've got no worries about this whatsoever. Now with the Garberg, you have a couple of steel options. They first launched this knife using Sandvik's 14C28N stainless steel, but the version we have here is a carbon steel blade. Now Mora uses European nomenclature to name their steel, but it's effectively the same as the 1095 on the Condor. Now when you're doing this, you want to make sure you're hitting the spine of this at a very straight angle. You don't want there to be any flex, or you're going to risk damaging your blade. This Mora is ready to go. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick, just like the Condor. Let's see how it does here. Now on that first time through, I kind of just wailed on it a little bit, and I actually created a little bit of a split. So I'm going to do it again down here, being a little more careful to form a V a little bit better so we don't get that splitting action. There we go. Now I just need to do it one more time right here at the end. All right, that's gonna form the basis of our tent stake using the Mora. So I got a little bit of splitting on this side again when I was using the Garberg. So I'm gonna start underneath this knot here with the Condor. Very good. Yep, got a little bit of a split. So even though we got that split, I'm not going to worry about it right now since we're just demonstrating, but you definitely would want to do something a little bit differently if you were actually going to use this. So as I've been doing all these cuts that I need to do in order to execute a tent stake, my stop cuts, some chest lever grip stuff, even the bracing on the knee to get more leverage to cut through the tip, finding the Garberg has a very comfortable handle. It's got a very large oval cross section, so it indexes very well in the hand, but because of the nature of it, it's almost symmetrical, so it works in just about any grip you can think of. Whether you're cutting reverse, that chest lever where you're pointing it towards your knuckles, it just fills the hand very nicely, and I find it very easy to use. Now I'm going to switch over to the Terrasaur and see how it compares. Now you can see right away that the handle is a little bit narrower and a little bit thinner as well, and it has a shape that's a little more biased towards a forward grip. So we'll see how that does for us while we're cutting. So you can definitely see there where this piece of wood split while I was cross batoning it. Now that's not really a good thing. You're not going to want to actually use this because if you pound on that, it's going to split even more. But for demonstration purposes, like I said, we're just going to keep going. Now one thing I'm seeing right here, if you compare the blade shapes of the Terrasaur to the Garberg has a bit more belly out near the tip, whereas the Terrasaur has a bit of a narrower tip. The reason I bring that up now is I'm actually carving in with the tip right behind this knot, and that's where that narrower profile comes in handier for those tighter spaces you can get it into. So even though the Condor has a slimmer handle, I didn't find it uncomfortable at all. It was still very easy to use, and I didn't find myself fearing any kind of hot spots or feeling like any blisters were being raised or anything like that. Now when it comes to the edge itself, out of the box, the Mora had a bit of a sharper edge than the Condor. The Condor was just a little bit behind it. Before I brought them out here today though, I did make sure to sharpen and freshly strop both of these knives so they were on pretty even footing, at least in terms of the sharpness of the edge itself. Now in terms of the edge geometry itself, I actually found that the Condor wanted to bite into the wood a little bit more aggressively than the Mora did. That made it easier to hog off big chunks, especially when I was doing the cuts where it was braced against my knee. I had no problem ripping off bigger chunks of wood, whereas the Mora still did the job, but was just a little bit behind this in terms of performance, at least in terms, as I said, of the edge geometry itself. So the next thing we're going to do is going to turn our attention to doing a little bit of light splitting or batoning. This is going to be useful, let's say if everything's wet out and you need to get a fire going and you need to get to the dry wood in the center here, or you just can't find any good dry kindling. In that sort of situations, this is something you can do if your knife can stand up to it. Now, given that these are smaller knives, the blades are only a bit over 4 inches, we want to make sure the wood we're splitting is no thicker than our wrist so that we don't run the risk of overexerting our blade. Now the Mora certainly had no problem, at least with this small piece of wood, but you can see also another reason you might want a baton is to get a flat piece of wood like this. If you're trying to practice your primitive fire starting methods, this is a way you can get a flat piece to start your bow drill hearth. That way you can get a friction fire going even if you didn't bring your materials in. So just like the Mora, the Condor had no real trouble doing the batoning here. Now this particular piece of wood that the Condor was going through was a little bit knottier, but even in spite of that, the performance was just about the same. Now I know some people get nervous about batoning knives like this, especially when you're talking about cheaper bushcraft knives, but with the full tang construction and the 1095 steel, I'm not worried at all. And there's plenty of reports out in the wild of people who've batoned these knives and seriously abused them, and they've always come out on top. Now I mentioned a friction fire hearth board just a little bit ago, and to do one of those, one of the things you have to do first is actually put a divot into one side of the wood. Now you'll notice that both of these knives do have a protruding tang, which makes drilling a little bit more uncomfortable than with a rounded over pommel. Now that can be mitigated a little bit with a nice pair of work gloves, and that's going to let you get the job done, but that's something you're going to have to keep in mind if you choose this knife. Now on the flip side of that protruding tang does give us a little bit of an advantage. Say if we're using a piece of coal to burn out a spoon or a cup that we're making out in the wild, this makes a great tool for scraping away that charred wood if you're doing bushcraft tasks such as those. So on the subject of getting a fire going though, it's not going to start itself, so we're going to make some feather sticks to make some tinder. Now my apologies to the folks on Instagram out there who might be able to make some absolutely astoundingly beautiful feather sticks. It's never quite been my strongest suit, but at least out here near the tips, these are going to be fine enough to catch a spark. However, if you need to get even finer, both of these knives do come with a crisp spine. Not only can you use that to strike a fire steel, you can also use it to scrape wood or bark to work up a very fine fuzz that is going to catch a spark very nicely. Now I'm finding, at least for me with the Condor, I'm able to get a little bit finer curl and a little bit finer shavings than I was able to do with the Mora. On the other hand, I'm also cutting a bunch more off as I go along because I'm kind of slicing through a little bit more easily. Take that into account. Again, your mileage may vary, but either one's going to do feather sticks just fine. Now, as I mentioned, the Condor does have a crisp spine. I will say, however, it's not quite as crisp as the Mora. So if you're using it often to strike your fire steel or to scrape other things, the Mora is probably going to be a little bit more effective in that regard. Now I think that difference in the crispness of the spine kind of tells the tale of what makes these knives different from one another, because as I said, they are fairly far apart in price. The Morakniv Garberg is more expensive, but the fit and finish is definitely better than the Condor. The Condor is a great tool at a great price, but you are only paying a little bit over $40 for this, so it's not going to have world-class fit and finish. The Mora, however, is frankly astonishing with the level of high quality they're able to achieve for the price. When it comes right down to it though, both tools are going to perform very well, and some of it's going to come down to personal preference. Do you like something that's a bit nicer out of the box, or do you prefer something with a nice fat handle? Then the Garberg is definitely the way to go. I definitely appreciate the ergonomics and the quality of the tool you get with the Garberg. The Condor is no slouch though, and in terms of the fit and finish, it's perfectly fine, and certainly a lot better than they used to be about 10 years ago, I'll say that for sure. The handle's a little bit slimmer and it's a little bit lighter, so if you have smaller hands or you're conscious about weight, that could be a consideration. Even though it's a smaller handle, I still find it very comfortable, and I also really appreciate the taper right here at the front of the scales that lets you pinch grip even more effectively. Now's the part where you tell us which of these bushcraft knives would earn a place on your belt. Do you go with the Morakniv Garberg or the Condor Terrasaur? Be sure to let us know in the comments, and to get your hands on either of them, you can click the links in the description to head over to KnifeCenter.com. I'm David C. Andersen from the woods behind the Knife Center, signing off. See you next time.
Tempo!
Go away, or we will taunt you a first time.
Using that.
Sasquatch? You'll notice I'm always on time everywhere I go.